Welcome to our webinar on cultural awareness and how to increase your global performance. I wanted to bring once again the case about Tesco, which Egbert mentioned before. Maybe Egbert, can you give us your opinion, and then I'll go in details about this case. You spoke about the Tesco case in the USA. In my case, I wanted to speak about Tesco in Japan. Maybe give us your thought about what happened in the USA, and then I'll talk about Japan.
So maybe first, as a disclaimer, Tesco is not one of our clients. So the information I'm giving is an outside view on what might have happened. Obviously, the US, UK both speak English, or a version thereof. And the consequence of that is that typically we think that people that are very similar to us think alike. And this typically can lead to huge cultural mistakes, especially if mistakes repeat themselves. So now seeing the example of Tesco in Japan, and Tatjana will share a bit more on that. The fact that Tesco continues to hit its head is also a potential reflection on the company culture. Because if you make a mistake once, it might simply have been a chance. But if you make a similar mistake in your export business multiple times in a row, then it's a sign of an organization that is not advanced enough in terms of knowledge to be aware of the fact that different markets require different business models and different ways of interacting. So my note on this example of Tesco specifically is that it tells me something about their company culture as such.
Okay, what happened in Japan, that was a very interesting case because Tesco as a company in the United Kingdom, they are very successful. They have succeeded to gain such a market power. And when they went abroad, they were quite certain, once again, is that they will just copy-paste their business model and they will replicate it anywhere. So it's as well, sometimes, I don't know if Egbert is going to agree, or Laura is going to agree with me, is sometimes we can see that from very developed countries and strong companies. Not willingness to understand that they will have to adapt sometimes. So they went to Japan with the same type of stores, and they have replicated the low service large stores to Japan, which is not the culture of the market at all. In Japan they have a different kind of needs and different kind of habits. And they managed to gain less than 1% of the market share with huge losses. As you said, Egbert, more than hundreds of millions of losses. And for SME to make such a mistake is just impossible. It's a risk you cannot take. That's why we are trying to bring the point of importance of taking into consideration of the cultural factor, and cultural factor is not only affecting us as a person, but is the way we do business and try to do business abroad. And as a matter of fact, because of their failure, they had to exit the Japanese market. And what went wrong is, once again, in Japan, we like to go to the small stores, and we want to have great service, and we want to have quality products. And we want as well the products to be adapted to our taste because we like different flavors. And Japanese value the personal touch. Every time you give them something, you need to add a personal touch to the product. And they are very based on community stores. And basically they are ready to pay higher prices for the better quality. So, and when you don't listen to what the consumer wants, and when you don't understand that you are going to a new country, so basically you do a proper preparation to that country, then of course you prepare to fail. So once again, the global village is a myth, and culture is all around, and it impacts us in everything we do. And we need to take this factor into consideration in our international marketing design. And we need to adapt our resources to the new markets and sometimes prepare ourselves for these differences. And in the case of LoRa or other companies, when we go to very culturally distant countries, it's actually very wise to take a local partner. And for example, we another case of Hofstede Insights is when they go internationally and they have many offices, they always work with local partners, and I think they are the best ones to tell us why. Your mic is off.
Also, just unmuted the microphone. Yeah, so if we bring the question back to also your daily reality as an SME, why do we choose typically to go with local partners in specific cultures? Is because if you talk in SME terms, I mean, we're not talking millions, we're typically talking about opening a new market will cost you on average 100,000 to 200,000 euros. And that is the cost of acquisition, cost of operations, etc. 90% of startups fail. 90%. So if you would prefer to be part of that 10% to succeed and not waste 2 years and 200,000, investing a relatively small amount to preserve that amount of money and time, that is the reason why typically we advise to understand when going with a local partner is very useful. And when you select local partners, to understand what type of service model or business model and market business product proposition you would need to design. So it is this aspect of consciousness that will help to be successful in new countries, not just your home country. And that's basically the reason why we as Hofstede Insights always explore that option of the ability of going with a local partner, because it is always a combination of local market knowledge and having something new to offer. And that's the strength of basically being both global and local.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, thank you, Egbert, Laura, and thank you for all our attendees. I would like to welcome right now the questions. Do you have any questions? So we have here Nora. I spoke to you, Nora, already. Joe, Lucy, Sandra. Do you have any questions? Can we help you with some other examples or testimonies? And how do we do it?
I think typically the easiest way in order to preserve the audio quality is that if you have a question, if you use the chat screen, I have seen that most of us have been able to find it. So if you type your question there, then we'll be able to reflect on it.
You can type in your questions on the chat screen. There you go.
Okay, so how long does it take to know a new culture?
Good one. Thank you, Sandra, for this question.
Laura, Tatjana, would you like to go first?
I'm going to allow you to start, Egbert.
Oh, thank you. So I would say it depends to which extent do you want to know the culture. Some people say you need to understand the language before you understand the culture. My answer would be, of course, slightly biased. I typically say I can explain any culture to anybody within 10-15 minutes.
Really?
And this is why we use a model, because the model will describe the central tendencies in a culture, and that is typically enough at the outset to understand where can I anticipate what type of challenges or what type of opportunities. If you want to know more about the precise do's and don'ts, then typically I would advise to reserve 2-3 hours and read a good book on a particular country, or simply use Wikipedia. because the internet has a huge amount of knowledge. But if you want to understand the central tendencies in a certain culture, just log into Prime Target, have a look, or at our country like webpage, the country comparison, and you'll get an overview of the 6 central tendencies in any society. At the moment, I think we've got a database of over 110 countries. Now, of course, the world has about 200 countries, I believe, so we're missing 90. But if you understand somewhat of the history, somewhat of the legal system, the education system, then typically using other countries for which we have data available will allow you to make a pretty good estimate on a top level. If you want to really know the details, of course, it takes a bit more time.
Okay, I have thank you, Egbert. I have a question. Can you type in it's to our attendees the country you are coming from, you are connected from, to see our multicultural dimension?
And while she's doing that, I'll just add, I think you can, like Edgar said, get a basic knowledge of a culture very quickly by reading things online. And yet at the same time, culture is a bit like peeling off an onion, layer by layer. And the deeper you get in, sometimes the more you're like, I don't understand anything. I've lived in France for 5 years. I speak French fluently. I'm married to a Frenchman. I have a family here. I have many friends. I feel like I've strongly integrated into the culture. And yet for our business, it does come back to who is the audience? What is the message we're trying to portray? And how am I going to send that message out in a way that people understand? And that's where the importance of a local partner does come in, because there are years of culture built into thinking a certain way. And so you can get that global understanding and be sensitive to it. But I do feel like you also need a local partner to help you balance out.
So we have a new question here.
So if we talk about the 6D framework, as Laura mentioned, culture is a bit like an onion. So we can, of course, understand the symbols. Do you give a card with one hand, with two hands, etc.? Do you use your titles or not? The value part, which is the core of the onion, and that's the basis of the 6D model, is where we have all that data available. Now, how you use that data in practice is to basically very quickly understand for a variety of topics, how do I, for example, structure my sales material? So if you have a culture that has what we call more hierarchy, and it has a larger amount of uncertainty avoidance, and France is an example of this. People need to understand the big philosophy behind the service, and they also need to know the detail. That applies for France. The same applies for Poland. The same applies for Hungary. The same applies for Romania, because all these cultures share the same kind of tendency in terms of hierarchical thinking and higher uncertainty avoidance. If you take a country for comparison of the UK, which is low on hierarchy and very low on uncertainty avoidance, if you start with a big philosophy and lots of details, people will lose you after the second minute, because they want to basically have nitty-gritty, action-oriented information. So this is how you would use that type of knowledge to structure information flow. Same would basically apply for communication between different employees. So if we take the example of Publicis and Omnicom, on a national level, French versus the US. The US is rather black and white in a lot of its thinking. It's very short-term oriented, very action-driven, very low in that sense in terms of long-term vision. If you match that with the French approach, which is big philosophy, lots of details, more long-term future, meaning a bit more flexible in its thinking. You can go left, you can go right, as long as you go forward. That's when already in the whole acquisition process, you start having different communication flow. And on the shop floor, the working floor, people will get completely frustrated with managers not giving enough information or giving too little information or giving way too much information. So leveraging the 6D model is a bit like key performance indicators as a dashboard. It will give you some, and again, I'm saying not the old, like the complete, it's not one-on-one, it's not 100% guarantee, but it will give you a better understanding of what is the likelihood that people will behave in certain ways in groups. So that's how you use the 6D model. Understand the specific issue. Is it structure of information? Is it giving feedback? Do you do that personally? Do you do that in a group? All of this can be explained by kind of playing with the 6D model.
A brief example of that is looking at Prime Target. So in France, in the US, if I want to sell my goods, I can just email a company. I'm not there. I send an email. I send my lookbook. I send my price list. We may or may not have a phone call that lasts 20 minutes and the sale is done. But in France, I have to go to a shop, which is what I've been doing today just before this, visit them 3 to 5 times, have an hour-long conversation about life and all of those things before anything moves forward. It's just, it is different. But if you don't have that basis on the difference, like Edgard said, if you don't have that model that directs you in the right way, you're completely taken aback by that. And you could think, hey, okay, I'm never going to make a sale, or this is impossible. But if you understand and you have this just background knowledge that this is the way the culture works, you're prepared, you feel more confident to go in and make things happen and adapt.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? If not, I think we have come to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank once again all of the attendees. First of all, thank you for your interest. You'll receive an email from ourselves with the presentation and as well with the link to the video. I would like to thank once again Egbert. Thank you, Egbert and Hofstede Insights.
More than welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Laura Druid. Thank you very much for coming. So we would like to say merci beaucoup. Thank you, and good luck with your international development, and let's hear from you good news.
Looking forward to staying in touch with everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're eating.